And I guess I could say welcome back to the world. We're finally getting to have some engagements and interactions with people and things like that. Tonight is Meet the Artist with Michael Dillon from not too far from here. I want to start out to thank some people that are instrumental in us being here, the Arts Center and Toby Smallwood, the city of Alpharetta, and Kim Zane and Morgan Rogers, and Arts Alpharetta, of which I'm a part of, and Nancy's back there. And Ben is right there, and other people. We're a volunteer citizen group that helps with all the arts in town, and so and arts groups, and so we're thrilled to be back at this, which was sit and talk to artists about what they do and learn from them, and then see what they've how their brain works. That's always interesting. So we'll get started. We're going to let Mike talk about himself a little bit. And he's got some slides we're going to go through that kind of tell his story. And so I think it's going to be very exciting. So glad to be back with you and talking about things.
Thanks
you,
for
being
Mike.
here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I guess getting right into it, I would call this my more hair and less gut picture. It's about it's about 20 years old. This is a shop that I ran in Roswell for about 15 years. My background education is Kansas City Art Institute. I'm originally from Kansas, and I met my wife there. We moved back to Atlanta in the early 90s. This is a piece actually I built as a student at the Art Institute. I began to weld in high school, so I was familiar with some metalworking, but developed my language there somewhat as a student. From there, after we moved to Atlanta, I set up a small shop in my garage and tried to pound out a few things for myself. That's kind of rolled into commission work. I did have a day job at that time, so I was mostly working, and I'd work in my shop on the weekends and whatnot. This shows, a simple place to work, cold forge, power hammer. I met a man named Stan Strickland. I was introduced to him through the Tully Smith Blacksmith Guild, which is now the Alex Beeler Blacksmith Guild, and that is our local chapter, as well as other really well-rounded smiths. But Stan kind of took me under his wing and mentored me. I worked with him several years. He helped me get my start in the architectural field.
And this was where? He was here?
Yeah, Stan moved to Jefferson from Stone Mountain, I think in '94. And he was able to put me on as help,
right?
Part-time help.
So you would go out there and learn from him?
2-hour drive each way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ate it up. And Stan was a great guy, lots of great stories, hard-working man.
Yeah.
Lots of knowledge, so it was really a great friendship.
Do you see some of his work in yours? A lot of his influence?
Probably more work ethic than in the work itself.
Right.
I would say.
Cool. We all need mentors.
But this is his shop, so you kind of get an idea of tool envy here. But Stan was a tool collector since the 70s, and this was a working blacksmith shop in Jefferson that I worked at. This is the shop I opened in Roswell in 1997 as my first professional blacksmith shop. Stan helped me to meet with several architects, and I worked in the Buckhead area for about 15, 20 years after that. Really didn't move out of that zip code.
You did a lot of commission work there?
A lot of stair railings, mostly curved stair railings. A lot of architectural work. I even had this steam hammer set up in Roswell and nobody knew about it. So you turned it on. Yeah. I was actually on Maple Street, which is right kind of next to the historic park, right downtown Roswell. And nobody knew I was back there. It was an old radiator shop, and we used to get people coming in every once in a while asking to repair the radiators. Yeah. I built my new studio, the one I'm in now. I started it in 2008, moved out of Roswell. This building I designed and had fabricated and built on the property that I live on with my wife and my kids. This is kind of an interior shot of the studio. It's kind of a shotgun alleyway, doors on both ends, and lots of equipment. I think I outweighed Stan's shop in tonnage, maybe not in pieces, but in tonnage.
Oh, yeah.
These are the power hammers that you've seen kind of out on the videos. They're not made anymore, but that's what they help me do my work. This is what I use to do a lot of the blacksmith work. The other side of the shop, these are the air hammers, and I mean, there's probably 40 tons of machinery in that shop.
So what's out at his studio, those hammer things, I mean, they're intimidating. You know, they're just like something right out of a horror movie. You know, I mean, they're just like bang, bang, and I mean, it's just, the force is incredible. So how much force is being generated by those things?
They measure it in joules. It's a power of energy that they imply, or foot-pounds. I think the big steam hammer's somewhere around 3,000 foot-pounds per square inch or something like that. It's pretty enormous. Some of the photos that you'll see, you'll understand the capacity of these hammers.
You could crack some pecans with that, couldn't you?
Yeah. This is demonstrating at the High Museum with the Tully Smith Guild. So throughout, the years, I've been a member of the Tully Smith, which is local guild, the Banna Group, which is national guild, and we try and get out in the community and demonstrate and educate, and that's a big part of being able to preserve and continue the craft.
Have you noticed an increase in number of people that want to get into this?
Yeah, definitely. I think over the years. When Stan started in the early 70s, there was really no information, and there was a resurgence through Urbana, and it actually started in Georgia. And there was many folks here in Georgia that started our national group, Urbana.
Yeah.
In 73, 72, Alex Beeler lived in Georgia, or lived in Atlanta, and he was a big part of that. So that was the Alex Beeler Blacksmith Group.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
So now you're part of all that.
Yeah, I try to do my part and, pass it on. Demonstrated at Madison, Georgia, where we have a Southeastern Blacksmiths Group. So that's every 2 years we get together all the guilds from the Southeast, and we have a show, and they demonstrate and tailgate sales and stuff like that. It's educational opportunity.
So you were the mentee before, so now you mentor people.
I do both. I get a lot of education from my friends still. I mean, it's ongoing. I don't know anything really, but I'm trying. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of learning. It's continuous learning. This is a demonstration in Austin at Mobile Loaves Community. They actually have a competition where they get together numerous smiths from around the United States, and the proceeds go to help fund the homeless. This is Mobile Loaves Community is tiny homes, and they help provide a community for homeless people in Austin. So it's a really good event, and a lot of great smiths get to participate.
That's cool.
It was a wonderful opportunity.
What comes out of these things other than learning from your...
It's camaraderie. It's getting together with your friends and having a beer and talking about blacksmithing and what's going on in the community. So it's a good time, but it's also kind of a show because it's a timed event. You have I think it was an hour to create something. I believe maybe it was 2 hours to create a piece, and you could use you couldn't use any electrical power tools or anything. You had to do it all at the forge, which is a little different than what I'm used to. But I came up with a piece that I felt symbolized what they were trying to do there, and it was an abandoned tent. You can kind of see the flowing shape of that, and the bottom plate had footsteps pounded into it as they were leaving the encampment.
That's cool.
So it was just the idea, everybody comes up with a different idea, and then they make the piece. And at the end, everybody votes on what they feel is the best work. So there's
just,
kind of a prize at the end.
So just a hot fire and your hammers.
Yeah, that's it.
An
The tools
anvil.
that you can bring, you know, and that's there. So
Cool.
And now I'm teaching at Roswell somewhat on a limited basis. They have a blacksmith shop at Clay West. So again, the education part of it, trying to give back a little bit of what I've done. I also have an artist in residence. Ulu is working with me at my studio, and he has a piece over here at the Alpharetta.
Brook Street Park.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it. Miles, it's called. Yeah. It's over there. Yeah, kind of behind City Hall. Check it out.
So just a lot of opportunities to kind of, you know, bring the community together, educate, pass on knowledge, and learn something. Like just seeing Ulu's work come together has been very beneficial to me. You know, it's been a great time. So
You've given him a wonderful chance to express his art, that's for sure.
yeah,
I don't think he would have been able to do it without what you let him do.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's been my pleasure. So
Yeah, it's good stuff.
it's good.
Speaking of, Mike has things in town. Up by the library, just to the left of the library is Bird, B-R-D. That one's over there, and there's one out front here.
Yep.
Is his.
And this
that one right there.
This
Yep.
is the concept sketch that was picked by Alpharetta. It was a call for sound sculpture. I proposed 4 different drawings, and this was the one that they gravitated to. This kind of shows a little bit of the process in the studio, how it's kind of going together. It's made out of stainless steel and iron, and it rotates. If you go outside, you can spin this piece, and it makes somewhat of a clanking noise, or it's just a sound sculpture. It's called Idiophone. Mm-hmm. So you can get an idea of the scale of it there.
So when you're coming up with this, do you scribble notes? Do you make more detailed sketches? Do you just kind of think about it? Is it on your mind when you're going to the grocery store? I mean,
yeah,
how's
it's
all that
all
work?
of the above. It's kind of, I try and sit down in a space that I'm comfortable in and really bang out what I think's relatable ideas and sketch them up. And some of them are loose sketches, and some of them, like this one, was more of a finished work almost.
Right.
But it went through a couple different generations before I got to that one.
Did all your ideas move like this one does?
Not all of them, no. This was a call for sound. I wanted to build something that was sound activated by the viewer instead of by wind. I think it gave it a different level of interaction and participation. So.
Yeah, because some of the pieces don't make any sound. They just represent music and sound. But yours, actually, it'll work. You spin it and it'll make sound.
And it's kind of discovery, too. You may not know that it moves, but once you see it move, then you understand that you can actually move it. So,
Cool.
So that's the finished piece. And then this is, like I was saying, sometimes it's a loose sketch. This is a concept for a piece I built for Nashville. It's called Aileron, and it was inspired by the biplanes of the 20th century. This piece moved on to become a public sculpture, and in that case, you have to go through a design process that involves engineering, and it has to be engineered to be put in the public and signed off on.
That's their requirement.
That's their requirement. So,
Is that the structure part of it?
yeah, structurally sound, wind loads, seismic loads, foundation. So it goes through all that to be able to put it out in the public.
And who calculates all that stuff?
The engineers.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of from the idea stage, though, I have to bring it, so this is my drawing. So this is where I brought it from a concept to what I felt I could build. And then I gave it to the engineer, and he ran through the sizes of materials and the bearings and the different alloys and the foundation work to be able to submit it to the city. So his drawings was similar to this, but it was stamped with his.
So
You
it
know.
was their engineer, or you had to hire an engineer?
I have to hire an engineer, yeah.
Oh my God.
So the engineer that I used actually had to be licensed in Tennessee too. So the engineer that I normally use was not, so I had to find another engineer. So those are kind of some obstacles that you may find in work like this.
When you give him the design, because that's, you know, you can scale it up or down as needed. Does he tell you how far you can scale it up? We can make this thing 11 feet wide and 7 inches, and then the stresses are too much for the metal or whatever. Is there kind of like a,
Well, and this
thing ended up big, right?
Yeah, it's 18 feet tall and 25 feet across, and it spins.
Right.
And there's 1,800 pounds that spins in the air. So, you know, for me, I did a lot of that front end work, and I enjoyed doing that. I mean, that's where I brought that piece to a vision, was to be able to do that. If I handed off that sketch to the engineer, I don't think it would look anything like what it ended up to. You know, so I think that's the compromise I'm not willing to take.
Right.
I want to do that part of it, but I can only take it so far.
But you can get close.
I can get pretty close.
Yeah.
I tend to overbuild.
Yeah.
So, you know, these materials that I'm working with, some of them are like 4-inch solid, 2-inch plate. I mean, this piece was very heavy, but it didn't need to be light for any reason. So,
I saw that there's a pin to call, it's a large pin that holds the 3 pieces together where they converge.
yep.
That seems it would weaken it, when you cut that slot through there.
It's actually a really strong joint to make because you lose no material. You'll see here shortly, this is forging some of the first pieces. This was 3-inch plate, weighed about 300 pounds. It was 8 inches wide. And
That became what part of the sculpture?
it was a part of one of the legs. It went from the intermediate, what I call the intermediate, it went from 2-inch plate to that 3-inch plate and then to 4-inch square. So that plate was cut, flame cut in a dimension to where I could forge out the 3-inch plate to 2 to meet with the 2-inch plate and then forge the other end to 4-inch square. So it was kind of, and then it got welded together.
Wow. You start at the bottom when you're making it? Or you have pieces
No,
like...
there was a bunch of pieces in progress at the same
Yeah.
time. This is what we were talking about earlier. This is a slit and drift of 4-inch square, so you're talking this, about that big material. And there was 3 pieces identical to this that were split and then opened up. So I lost no material in making that hole. So the structure of that piece is relatively the same as the parent material.
Where do you get the material?
Steel yard will have 4-inch square on hand normally. It's something that they'll carry. And this was the rivet that held it all together.
Wow.
And then that's the piece, that's the base of the piece in the shop.
So that's 16 inches across that?
So the 3 pieces together, 12 inches. And then the rivet was probably, when it started out, about 18 inches or 16 inches. And then when it's headed over, it held it all together. We did one end in the shop, and then everything went out to Nashville unassembled. And we put it together there and riveted the other side on site. And then we stood it up like this.
So you hadn't put it together until it got to Nashville?
Well, I had it pre-assembled,
Yeah.
like in this photograph, but the final assembly was done there.
Huh.
And it took us about 8 hours to put the whole piece
With
together.
the big crane and all that?
Yeah, 100-ton crane on site.
How did you head over the other side of the river?
Yeah, the technique I came up with was to be able to move that much mass. I actually drilled out the center of the pin and actually rolled the pieces over, kind of like a roll pin, instead of having to move the whole mass out from the center out. So it worked out nicely. I did a few tests, and we did it by hand, basically sledgehammers.
Jeez,
You and several other people.
2 people.
no kidding. Man, wow.
Long day.
Yeah, it was about 8 hours, but you can see here we're putting the top on. It's probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
So that's in downtown Nashville?
This is at McCabe Park.
Cool. Very neat.
But yeah, that's the crane lifting the final piece on. You can kind of get an idea of scale from that.
Right.
And that's the No, there's one section that moves. And it moves very slow and graceful because of its weight, but it doesn't take a whole lot for it to move. So the wind does move it very easily.
But the first thing you did was make a small version of it, right?
Yes,
From a
there
CAD.
is a model. So it went from concept drawing to model. The way that I got the job was through a process called RFQ, Request for Qualifications for Public Art. I send in my resume, some images. They picked 3 or 4. I think in this case there was 4 people picked to give a proposal, and all those proposals are different. You have to come up with the idea. So my idea was realized into a model that I could actually take and say, this is what I want to build. A lot of artists may use a 3D rendering or sketches. I always work better directly with the metal, so I brought a model, and I think that's really what pushed my project ahead.
Yeah. So the model was pretty close to the final thing?
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked out good. And
Did the model, did the RFQ come with a budget?
it did. Yeah. And I guess getting back to the question that you had about the engineer could say it's this big or that big, I did have the other constraint of the budget that I had to consider when I built the piece. So what can I do for that amount of money?
Right. Yeah.
So do you have
That makes
to make
sense.
an investment to build the model and do it?
They sometimes give you a stipend anywhere from $500 to $1,000. More or less a travel expense.
Yeah.
But I got to keep the model, which I still have. It's a nice representation of my work at that time. So
Is it out here?
it was displayed here at some time, but I did not bring it this time. We had shown it before, but. This is some loose sketches for Ascension, which came after Aileron. So I'm showing you guys really some major projects that I've done in the past. These are mostly public art. I do have a few architectural items in here, but this is a lot of times how these works begin. Just a loose sketch, an idea. Again, went to a model, and my technique is to take it to a golf course where the greens are real short. And get real low on it so that you get the idea of what it may look like.
That's cool.
And then again, this one is for Duluth. It's over McClure Bridge, right up from Duluth. And it was an RFP, so you had to actually give them a proposal to be entered into instead of your qualifications. So from the front end, you had to develop your idea. So there's a couple different ways that they call for art.
If you go into Duluth, it's there at one of the roundabout things.
I believe
It's a little bigger than that. Yeah.
I believe they picked like 12 finalists and narrowed it down to like 6 finalists, something like that.
Yeah, it's cool. When you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I've seen that.
And then again, so here's an example of a rendering by the engineer and what was submitted for the project. From that loose sketch to a model to this. And again, I tried to give him an idea of what scale material I was wanting to use, 1-inch plate, 3/8 stainless, whatever it was, and how I wanted to build it, be able to accomplish that. But it was, really a working relationship that we had together, that he would understand, what I wanted to do and what I was after, and be able to calculate the wind loads and the structural loads on this work.
So he comes back to you with this, and then you read that and go, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, it's similar to this, but again, it's real close to this, the end result. Mostly, he has to take into account the foundation, I don't really have anything to do as far as, he says it's got to be this big to hold this piece up.
Right. He tells the city that.
Well, I propose it to the city,
Yeah.
but it's, the engineering drawings are stamped with his engineering stamp, so. So this is, again, working in the shop. This is 1-inch plate that was rolled. This became the plow that was the bottom half of that piece. As you can see here in the shop, again, working to weld the two halves together. This piece weighs about 4,000 pounds alone, so.
Jeez. You better make sure you know where you're putting it.
You said that was rolled?
Yeah, the two halves were rolled. Yeah, it was a large roller. I took it to Birmingham to get it done.
Rolling does what?
So this was, the 1-inch plate came 10 feet wide, and I think it was like 14 or 16 feet long.
And it's flat.
It's flat. I have it cut, the shape cut in it that I want to take out, but I left it in the plate with little tabs. And then they send the whole plate through a rolling machine, which is basically rolls about this size, 3 of them, and it basically just creates a pinch point where they roll it back and forth till they get the radius that I specify.
To get the curve that you need.
Right, and then I brought both those rolled plates back and cut the remaining tabs out and lifted the pieces out that I needed.
So leaving it still intact with the other piece helps create that point where it starts to turn. Or
Yeah,
bend.
the reason, and I didn't know that before I started, but the research that I did, what happens is it's wider at the bottom and it's narrow at the top. If you were to roll that out of the plate, it would bend it more where it's narrow and less where it's wider. So
That's why you keep it in one piece.
that's why you keep it in the plate itself, in the parent material, so that it all stays at the same radius. So that was some of the learning
Yeah?
I was accepted on the project. So.
Right. Because I would imagine when you're using smaller pieces, that's not as big a problem as when
It
you're doing
is a
something.
problem.
Is it?
Yeah,
Still?
but it's just part of the process that
Yeah.
you got to figure out as you go. I mean, I had no idea how to do this, but it was on my plate, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
This is another shot. I'm starting to build the stainless steel bird that sets on top. You can see kind of a modeled frame in the background that sets on top, and the start of the nose.
So there seems to be kind of a theme going on here. That moves. It's got wings.
This one
There's a
does.
thing out here with wings.
Yeah.
The other one we saw had, so that was inspired by airplanes.
Yep.
So where did this movement/flight theme come from?
Well, I think it's a real interesting kind of balance between this, well, not even a balance, but from a heavy material, seeing something so graceful and being able to have it look like it's flying, even though it's, tons of weight. I think that's what interests me in that idea.
When you were little and you saw a big plane fly over, you're like, how does that do that?
Yeah,
kinda
I
like that.
questioned everything when I was young, and I still do, I think.
Yeah.
I have an inquisitive mind. I look at stuff and how it's built all the time, look at how it's put together. No, this one does not move.
Right.
But that's at the studio, loaded up. I actually took the top off to transport it, but it was just pulled it out of the shop into the sunlight to see how it looked.
I'm sure that got a few looks going down the road.
Yep, and that's the installation. That's 1,800 pounds of stainless that was forged and fabricated, and then the base weighed about 4,000 pounds. And that's in the roundabout. And this piece was inspired, the donor, AGCO, they donated the money for this project to Duluth. They build tractors, so it's representing a plow. You got kind of a rocky area that it's going through, and then behind the sculpture was planted with lush vegetation to create kind of a growth pattern.
Yeah, it's amazing. Next time you go to Duluth, you'll see it. You can't miss it.
This is, again, this is kind of a mash between concept and engineering drawing, trying to give it scale, get my ideas out how I want to construct the piece, This piece is in Milton at Bell Memorial Park. It's called Victory. It was inspired by the feeling of, winning. It's at a sports park, so the idea of raising your hands in victory.
Cool. Yeah.
Hence the name Victory.
And the small version is out here in the gallery, right?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
This is 6-inch solid that we made this piece out of, and that's about a 300-pound piece. We actually had to use a forklift to hold this one.
Is that one of those big hammers again?
Yeah, it's an air hammer. It has an 800-pound head that hits about 2 times a second, and it will shake the earth.
Oh, yeah.
Let me does it have your protection?
It has a foundation under it's about 12 feet deep,
I guess.
full of concrete, about 40,000.
12 feet of concrete under that?
Yeah.
Jeez. Do the neighbors ever complain?
No.
Is that why you kind of off by yourself?
We're pretty far out there.
Yeah.
But there was 3 sections forged: the body, the wings, and actually the head was a different section. But it was all kind of one forging, and you had one chance to get it right.
So the body and all of that is one piece, then the wings are 2, and then the head, and that's kind of it?
Yeah, and I had the base that I built for it.
Yeah.
So that's a shot of it, kind of a small picture, but.
Way cool.
This is Unity, which is out front here. This was a proposal for Atlanta, Martin Luther King Boulevard Gateway sculpture. I believe it was 2019 that I gave this proposal. It's 3 different materials: stainless, bronze, and iron. And it did have a light element that went through the middle of it that is not shown in this show.
So why did you come up with that? Just kind of.
Well,
Was there a theme to the?
yeah, I mean,
So
Unity.
in-
I was trying to think of what I felt Martin's message was.
Right. I mean, was
And-
everybody using Unity as?
Oh no!
Is the thing-
I mean,
okay.
everybody came up with a different idea.
Gotcha.
So, the 3 different materials, they grasp together. They help one another.
Right.
In their movement forward. So
Cool.
this is architectural work, which is out here. Again, just a rough, well, it's not a rough sketch, it's a finished sketch that I could put dimension to and understand the size of the pieces that I wanted to use. Here's engineering that I did on the work to figure out how it all go together, and layout from floor to floor. This piece actually is supported from the ground, and the balcony, which is really small, kind of near the door, hangs from the ceiling, and that's it. There's no other structure to this piece.
So this is a spiral
So
staircase.
you can
and-
see there in the
There we
shop kind of how it's,
So most of that's constructed with a hammer on an anvil, right?
yeah. My friend that does woodwork helped me with the layout, and he did the wood on it. But all of it was hand forged.
Was it the client who requested the trees, or did he
I
just
had-
say, "Make me a staircase"?
Yeah, I had. He wanted a staircase, and there was the architects involved, and they're having trouble trying to figure out how to get in the space because it was so small. And I proposed this idea, and actually had to fight for it pretty hard because they told me it couldn't be done. So.
So how do you support that just from the ceiling?
Well, the balcony, you can kind of see to the back, the balcony, the top newel posts actually grew into trees, and they went up into the ceiling, and they had put a I-beam in the ceiling during construction, and I tied to that. And then the bottom was attached to the concrete. But other than that, it was a floating stair with no typical structure. Like normally if you see a spiral stair, you'll see a channel, a piece of channel, or an I-beam, or box tube, or
Right.
something that supports the structure. In this case, the stair was the structure itself. The stair, the railing, the pickets were all part of the structure that held the piece up.
So you had to know exactly where that I-beam was and make that hit right on it.
Yeah, I mean, in most cases, there's very little tolerance. You know, you got to hit
Yep.
it, or it's a piece of junk. Here's a recent project. It's a large archway for a private residence, and then this is in the shop. We just finished this one up about 2 months ago. Again, concept drawing. This is a BEMA table for Temple Sinai, worked directly to a model. This is about 500 pounds of bronze that became the table. 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch thick material.
So you just buy flat bronze and pieces and have at it. Do you have to roll this since it's all curved?
This
Or
was
can
actually
you-
done under a hydraulic press. A lot of it.
So you hold, how do you make it curved? I mean, you said, so what does that mean? Like you hold one part and,
Basically just a fulcrum. So you block up 2 sides of the plate and press in the middle and put bend in it.
okay. So it's what you're pushing against is curved
No,
already.
it's just taking the flat piece, putting a block here, there's nothing under the center, and you're pressing down until
Oh,
you get
okay.
the amount of curve that you want.
Gotcha.
So you could do that in your shop with your equipment?
Yeah, I have a 100-ton hydraulic press. It actually bent, for aileron, it bent 2-inch plate, cold, that was about 18 inches wide to curve. So it doesn't really care what you put on it.
No.
You heat the piece up to bend it, or you said cold?
A lot of the work's done cold because of the amount of time it takes to manipulate the work. Like if it's hot, I can't touch it. I have to hold it with something. So a lot of times I do work material cold just because I can sit there and work it for an extended period of time and work out, you know, a graceful curve or whatever I need to do. A lot of times it has to be done hot, especially forging, or it's not going to move. So forging, I'm changing the shape with the hammers by pounding it. With the hydraulics, I'm changing the shape by bending it.
These things, like I said, they're cool, but they're scary machines. How dangerous are they? I mean, do you get to the point where you kind of like, okay, I'm tired, I need to focus, and therefore I'm going to step away from this, you know, whichever one it is?
Yeah, everybody wants to be a blacksmith till July and August in Atlanta,
Yeah, I bet.
Georgia.
Uh-huh.
It's hot. It's hard
Yeah.
work. It's heavy. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dirty. It'll kill me
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah,
But-
I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, but you do have to be really conscious of
Yeah, yeah.
what you're doing, because
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure there's some.
I'm familiar with all the machines. I've rebuilt several of them. I've worked on all of them.
Where did you get those machines? It's not like you can go to Lowe's and buy those things.
No, they're industrial. You just got to look around. A lot of them found me somehow.
And they weigh how much each?
The largest one weighs 9 tons.
Jeez Louise.
Under 90,
9 tons.
9 tons.
Yeah, 18,000 pounds.
So how do you get that down here from wherever it was? Was it at an industrial
A
forge,
friend.
like a steel? Yeah,
A friend
steel
with
plant?
a big trailer.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if you ever arrive at my shop, you'll take note of the steep hill that goes to the shop.
Yeah.
It's pretty steep.
Oh yeah, no kidding. How'd they get them up there?
That's
Jeez.
right. How do they do that?
Man, alive. That's yes.
What sort of finishing and polishing goes to make that brass so smooth and beautiful?
Yeah, the bronze is a beautiful material. I like to work it in a lot of my projects. I've probably gone through, I don't know, 2,000, 4,000 pounds of bronze in my career, but it's a lot of handwork, patinas that I use to create different colors, and my wife helps me out with that a lot. So it's kind of a painterly process You really have to pay attention to the temperature of the material and what kind of chemicals you're using. The finish on it, you have to get right before you even start any of that. You have to be able to abrade it or use abrasion to get the finish correct before you even start to patina it.
So that's kind of a brushed finish.
Yeah, it's more or less a brushed finish, and that's one of the big hammers. This is so a lot of the pieces go through that process of concept, design, engineering, but some of the work is born from the material itself. Like the wing became what it is, Avion became what it is from the material and what it wanted to be, or what I thought it wanted to be. This is forging that big skull out there. There's no drawings, there's no models. It's a process that you go through to arrive at that. So this machine actually has to be run by 2 or several people. There's a driver, which I'm driving it, and then my helper, Mackenzie, was holding the material.
How hot is that piece of metal?
I was gonna say, how hot is it?
Up to 2,000 degrees, somewhere around 1800.
How long does it take to heat that up?
It could take 40 minutes, but once it's hot, it keeps its heat for a good amount of time, and then it doesn't take as long to get hot because it's already hot.
How do you heat it up? Is it a gas thing or?
Yeah, we use propane. It's a forge naturally aspirated with air, propane. And I have several sizes that I choose which one will work well with the material I'm working on.
You ever do hot dogs in there?
Nope, never have. Stuck a hot dog under the power hammer. See
yeah?
what? You want to know what damage, what your finger will look like.
Oh my gosh, no, I don't want to know. No, geez.
So this is a 100-ton friction screw press that I'm actually putting the eyeballs in that skull with. So it comes down. It's not like a hammer and it's not like a hydraulic press. It comes down and kind of squeezes. But it hits kind of slowly.
So what were these things? Were they being used for this kind of stuff before they made it up the hill?
This one has an Army tag on it, so it was in the Army at some point. It could have made lunch trays, it could have made helmets, it could have made silverware, it could have made, whatever tooling you come up with to put under this that needs an impact, it'll do.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know what they're making, but they could have made numerous things with it.
Yeah, that's cool. I did have a couple of things. So at what point in your career did you start to recognize this is a Michael Dillon piece, this is my style, this is, people can look at this and go, oh yeah, that's probably a Mike. Because every artist kind of develops their thing,
Yeah, I don't know. I think, a lot of the work is all over the board because of the commissions that I get. It's what the clients ask for. I do try and add what I feel is respect to the material and the idea. And I try and do the best job I can. I think, the craftsmanship level, being able to do a high level of craftsmanship on the work helps. Say this is done by myself or somebody that knows what they're doing.
How hard is it if you're working on something and you bang on it and you go, oops, can you fix them? Since it's metal, can you kind of go back and reheat it and try it again, or?
Sometimes, yeah, you can. Sometimes it's junk.
Yeah, really? It becomes something else.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's
it never goes away.
That's kind of the beauty of it, though, too, is you can have a happy surprise in that process. You don't have to. It's not like you're selling for something. It may be that you didn't realize, or I didn't realize that's what it would become. And I think a lot of these pieces out here show that because they are they're sketches, or they're like, well, what can I do with this tool and how hard do I have to hit it and where does it have to be to make this shape? So that's the learning or discovery within the work. And to make a tool to make a different mark is also, that experiment.
Well, didn't you say, isn't bird kind of pieces of other things, or?
Yeah, I was rendered out of work that had to be in, when I was building it, 10 years old at the time. And I didn't know it was just pieces that I've had. And I have still lots of those pieces around the shop that haven't become anything yet that may become something. So at that time, I had several of the pieces and they worked together, and then I made other pieces to complement those.
And that's the piece between City Hall and the library, if you see that one. It's like this thing like this, kind of like that. What was an unexpected thing that you learned or encountered or whatever, that whether it was from one of the conferences you go to or something that surprised you that is now part of what you do? I mean, is there something been like that? Where you look back and you go, wow, I didn't realize that moment changed what I do or anything.
Well, I think, a lot of people know me for the big hammers and the heavy work. And I always remember looking at these machines, and they were much smaller then. I mean, they looked much bigger than they do now. In comparison to when I first saw them, I always thought, wow, those are such great machines, and wow, the work I could do with one of those, I really would like one of those. And now it's like, wow, I wish I could have a bigger one.
Did they make them bigger?
Yeah,
Jeez.
Actually on the video you see out there, Center for the Metal Arts in Johnstown. Pat Quinn runs a school there, and they've taken over a shop that was Cambridge Iron, I believe. And they have several really large hammers. My large hammer is 800-pound ram, and the one that's on the video that I worked on has a 3,000-pound ram.
Jeez Louise.
So it's an enormous hammer, and that's one of the smaller ones that he has. So there's a 10,000-pound hammer there and they have a 4,000-pound hammer.
What is he banging on that he needs?
Well, they're not running. They're historic equipment.
Oh.
So some of them he got one of them running, but he intends to get them all running someday.
Yeah.
But it's a historic element of Johnstown that was saved by Johnstown, and they had looked for years and years for somebody to take the shop over to run it. And he agreed to do it several years ago, and he's making a great place for people to come learn.
Where is it?
Johnstown,
Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
He'll have all the seismologists freaking out if he gets those things going. Jeez. When are you most in the groove? At what part of the process do you go, okay, this is really working, I don't even notice the time passing? Because I'm sure some of it it's got to be different.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the forge you lose a lot of that. I don't hear the machines at all when I'm working on the machines. I'm really focused on the material, so I think in the forging process you can really lose yourself in some of that. Drawing and creating it is also a good way to kind of come up with new ideas. And
right. I'm sure, so that's cool. It's all part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the business side that takes a lot of time that people don't realize. That's somewhat taxing, but you have to do it.
That's the hardest part of being creative, is all that other part. Yeah, so true. So anyway, we're going to take a break, and we're going to move the cameras around, and we'll go out there and talk about some specific pieces. And so I hope you'll join us for that. So thank you for this part.
You're
it was very
welcome.
informative and wonderful stuff. So we'll take a break and move out there. So thank you.